Welcome to the Changemakers podcast, brought to you by Graf-Martin Integrated Marketing Solutions for Good. This season, we're focusing on what nonprofit leadership looks like in this next normal. I'm your host, Ellen Graf-Martin, and each episode, you'll get to join me in conversation with some of my friends and peers in the Canadian nonprofit space who are changemakers and groundbreakers across Canada and beyond. Let's jump in. Mark Petersen, Nate Peterson, welcome to the podcast. I'm so glad that you're here today. Mark, you and I have had the privilege, or I've had the privilege of working with you a few years ago, or I guess it was more than a few years ago now, before you made the transition to where you are now. So we're going to talk maybe a little bit about that. And Nate, you are brand new to me. I'm so excited to meet you and hear your heart and what you're doing as you work alongside Mark, who you just happen to be related to. So your last name is not incidental. Package deal. Or a package deal. So if you could, and Nate, I'll ask you to start, but if you could tell us who you are, what you do, and why you love what you do, that'd be a great way to start.
Yeah, absolutely. So together we're Stronger Philanthropy. We are a company that we have an interesting history in that it wasn't really an intentional business that Mark was starting at the beginning. In the 2008 financial crisis, Mark had been working for a foundation for 20 years or so. And in that financial crisis, there was a program that came out of that was an initiative for a group of foundations to work together to overcome the financial crisis. And that was called Stronger Together. Now, Mark started managing that group and their giving together. It was a collaborative granting experience. And out of Stronger Together came this concept of Stronger Philanthropy. So that was 10 years ago. Stronger Together ran for that long, and Stronger Philanthropy kind of emerged as a firm out of that. So I only came on 2 years ago to Stronger Philanthropy, and my background was in international studies, and I traveled extensively, seeing community leaders around the world, and coming back home to work with Mark was kind of it came full circle. And so I love what I do because, like your podcast says, I feel like a change maker when I'm doing this work. I think that we'll get into more of what we do later, but the importance of due diligence when working with charities has kind of become a huge passion of mine.
Oh, that's good. That's really good. And maybe not what people would expect because let's put some stereotypes right out there. I'm assuming you're a millennial and they're like, what do you mean due diligence? Millennials care about due diligence. So thank you. That's a great topic for us to talk about.
We do care. We should care more.
Excellent. Mark.
Yeah. Well, Nate and I go back a long way, as you can imagine. Yeah. And so in a sense, Nate has been journeying with me through many years of my career, observing and often involved in what I do. So since 2000, I ran Bridgeway Foundation, which was a private family foundation based in Ontario. And like he said, around 2008-9, we created this initiative called Stronger Together, which was Bridgeway plus other foundations working together in collaboration. And this Stronger Together approach allowed major donors to collaborate together and collectively fund projects that pushed for innovation within the charitable sector in Canada. And so we did that for 10 years. And as Nate mentioned, in the midst of this, in the past 4 years now, we've created, I left Bridgeway Foundation to create this firm, Stronger Philanthropy, which while I ran Bridgeway in the past, now they're a client of mine. So this was an interesting kind of evolution in things. Bridgeway restructured itself, and the restructuring and the creation of other foundations out of it created an opportunity where with Stronger Philanthropy, we could work together with these foundations that had been created. And so Bridgeway plus the other foundations that were created became clients of mine. And additionally, there are other clients outside of our family as well. So that's what Stronger Philanthropy is. We had to go through a real shift in orientation for who we are and what we do. In the past at Bridgeway, my clients were really or the people that I served were really the charities.
Mm-hmm.
We wanted the charities to be well funded through this private family foundation. And now, since Stronger Philanthropy has emerged, I'm realizing and recognizing that my clients are now these families. It's not the charities. Those are the beneficiaries of our work. But my clients are actually now these family foundations who we're trying to serve. And so it was a real pivot in terms of who are we actually serving and who market,
Mm-hmm. And I assume that you're actually kind of serving both because you have a vested interest in this sector being strong.
That's right. Yeah. And so you kind of have to have, two hats on all the time. You're looking at both ends.
And why do you love what you do? Because to stay in it, I mean, you've been doing this for a while now. So why do you do it?
Well, interestingly, I mean, maybe this is one of the questions further on that you're going to ask, but I mean, everything has been impacted by COVID, right? And this pandemic. And I'm, as you ask that question, I'm thinking in the worst days of the lockdown, which
why do I do this?
Almost experienced that moment, I think.
Yeah.
Where I was going, wow, why am I doing this? Do I really need to be doing this? And so being in the midst of that pandemic, you kind of evaluate everything in your life.
Mm-hmm.
One of the, I think, positive things of the pandemic was it really forces everybody to kind of grapple with what's good in your life. What's your calling, what's your vocation. And in my case, I came to understand I was really ready for a change. And that's okay. And I'm at a stage of life, 56 now. Today's my birthday.
Yes, happy birthday, Mark.
You mentioned that earlier on Facebook.
How lucky am I that I get to do this with on your birthday?
But, recognizing that in the last 10 years of my career, let's say from 56 to 65, I want it to be about succession. I want it to be about strategically empowering my next generation to succeed in life. And that's why Nate is coming along at this point in time. And, rather than hold on to the bitter end and not empower next generations in leadership, I'm all about, creating a platform for Nate to shine. And that's what gives me joy right now is to see him positioned for success and service in what he's doing.
That's so good.
And he's going to be way better at it than me.
And that's our hope, right? That and I don't know if you heard any of the first season, but in one of the episodes I talked about succession planning actually should be what we're always thinking about. Nate, you should be thinking about succession planning now. I'm thinking, okay, the people I invest in today are the people who actually mean that this work continues in ways that are relevant for whatever should come. And so, I mean, my birthday is coming. But I'm mid 40s. And so, but I'm thinking succession too. What if God tells me to leave what I'm doing right now? Who will do it? And so how do we do that? And so that's part of being free to do what you're supposed to do, right?
Yeah.
I'm a bit passionate about this too. So Nate, any pressure on you? I mean, because your dad even started with a family foundation, which I believe even as a grandkid in the family foundation, you were probably involved since you were a kid. So is there pressure on you to do this so well?
I mean, through the years, like you said, I've been involved with this for 14 years now, in some capacity or another. And so there is pressure to do well. I put that pressure on myself. I don't feel it too much from Mark. And I think it's more of a pressure to fix some of the glaring issues in Canadian philanthropy and in the charitable sector. It's not always the most efficient ecosystem of work. And I'm incredibly passionate about taking this on as a lifelong project in terms of really making a difference with the quality of charitable giving. That the concept of giving money is far different than the concept of philanthropy, and I think that there's a lot of pressure there, but it's good pressure. It's like a challenge. So I'm pretty
so
excited.
Good. So two things came out of what you just said. And so I know we can only ask one question at a time, but I want to park this. So you mentioned some glaring errors in the sector. So I'm going to park that one because I really want to hear that from you. And the other is, okay, what is the difference between giving and philanthropy? Because philanthropy is in your name. What is the difference? Because organizations are chasing a donor, but let's talk about philanthropy. What's the difference?
Yeah, from our end, I see a huge difference between donating money and philanthropy. I see when you're walking down Yonge Street in Toronto and you see someone who's homeless and they're requesting help, and you might put a toonie or a $20 bill, even if you're generous, in a coffee cup, and that is a generous act. It's a selfless, gift, but you're not asking for any accountability from that gentleman. Like you're not looking, and that it's really, your donation is really going to help him for that day, but it's not a long-term kind of solution. Philanthropy is the opportunity for those who have more resources at hand to be strategic about their donating and to be responsible actually with the act of donating. So there's something about philanthropy that makes it's more than just a donation where you don't expect anything else. You're making a difference, you're helping for that moment in time. Philanthropy is perhaps more long-term, more strategic. It's an investment really into changing something. And that's what I would say would be the difference.
I agree that concept of an investment, I think, is really important. That when somebody has a startup and they're looking for investors, they go out and pitch an idea, and they really have to get people to rally around their idea. And I think with major donors, they've been part of that business world a lot of the time, and that concept of investment resonates with them, and that storytelling and that kind of trying to get people to rally around your idea. And I think that it's important because if the idea is not formulated in a coherent way, then it's really shows a lack of planning. And when we're talking about, $10,000, $20,000, or top $200,000 dollars in terms, you want to hear a plan and you want to feel like you're getting a return on your investment. But I think in the world of philanthropy, we flipped the capitalistic narrative on its head, and instead of it being a return on investment financially, it's a return on investment socially. So you really have to be convincing people that the return on investment is there, and excite them about why they should be involved.
So just this week, we've actually been working with a nonprofit here in Canada, and we try to, just in case you don't know, we work a lot on brand with organizations and try to help them become clear. And one of the questions that we ask is really to get them to define who their donors are, and then even who the next generation of donors are. Because the question I get asked over and over and over is, how do we get young people to give? Because we realize that boomers, this is the end. But in my mind, it's that, how do we build philanthropy as a mindset and build something that younger people want to invest in, whether they have money or time right now? How do we do that? So what would you say? So we had this big conversation about actually transaction versus transformation, and how do we demonstrate transformation rather than transaction? And so just with that in mind, now how would you answer the question? Because I get asked it, I have no idea, and you probably do too. How do I get young people to give? Is that the right question even to be asking?
I love that you said that money or time, because both of those things are equally as important in this sector. In terms of giving, you can give both of those and make a world of difference with either of those two things or both of them. And so I think that in terms of getting young people to give, I think older generations had a narrative that tied in with tithing. Their religious beliefs gave way to a mentality of giving. Now, we've seen quite the mass exodus from the church in the past 10, 15 years from young people. And what worries me is that that narrative of giving might be throwing the baby out with the bathwater. But I think that in our age of social justice and this yearning for a better world, I think that people have the capacity to imagine how their time and money can actually be put to good use. I just think it's about framing that conversation in the right way, because I don't think it's a far leap from people's desires, and we just really have to be encouraging people to act on those desires beyond liking something on Facebook and beyond sharing something, or even, God forbid, leaving your house and doing something,
Mm-hmm. Right now it's tricky. Let's be honest.
Yeah. I guess right now we should have some grace.
Yeah. But there are other things like we even talked about when you have a young person, and I say young, and I mean like 35 and under, but who is willing to do things like advocate and crowdfund. And, there are different things, there are different ways to look about this. So I think this is part of the shift from giving to philanthropy. How do I invest my time and energy and money and talents, all of those things? So Mark, what would you say? You've seen lots of shifts over the years too.
I think it's important, for any charity to be thinking about generational shifts that are happening and to creating spaces within their organizations for millennials and Gen Z to be a part of their mission. And when my focus is really on major donors and family foundations. And so I think that charities have an opportunity to create spaces for next generations with family foundations to participate with the organization in their life. It's an opportunity for transformation, because it's much more than a transactional type of model where you're getting someone just to write a check. You're actually inviting them into, strategy meetings, brainstorming times together, or going on trips where they have opportunities to participate and observe and influence what's happening in the organization. Yeah, so I think it's a neat opportunity, and it's a long-term game. It's not something, I think everybody wants a quick fix and quick solution, but this is thinking and planning generationally and over a long term for participation by family foundations in organizational life.
And you specifically are focused on innovation, and how organizations are innovating in this time. And I think part of what I'm hearing you say is that charities don't have to do this alone if they have a good foundation partner as well. I heard one example, and I thought this is actually, and maybe you would agree or disagree, so feel free to say that, but that a lot of organizations in the past have looked at their donors as their army, doing, to just get the work done. But what they really need to look at is that their donors are the general, and that they are the army, that the donors are saying, okay, I want to impact this, and so I'm going to partner with this organization or this organization. And I wonder if this is kind of flipping it, of saying you could actually have a partnership that means that you don't have to come up with all the ideas on your own. Is that right? Or
yeah, and I think you need to be careful. I would encourage major donors to use discernment in how they interact with charities. You don't want them coming in and mandating things.
No.
And some people do that.
I've heard a lot of complaints about it.
But I would prefer to see it more of as a collaborative model, more of a conversation. When I always have this kind of mental image of how when you're creating your plan, let's say whatever your mission is as an organization, if it's feeding hungry people or whatever, and everybody is gathered around that. So if you have an accountant working for the firm, working for the charity, or if you have the frontline worker, all of them are committed to the actual act of helping people out. But together around that table, if we're setting a table of mission and you've got all your stakeholders there, we always have to remember to bring in the funders to participate around that table. They're not just there to finance things. They want to be involved in helping to shape the future as well, I think.
That's good. Well, and so I have, even heard just even in the last few weeks, people say, so, okay, we want to do this innovative thing, which actually may not be super innovative in the grand scheme of things, but for a small charity is actually pretty innovative, and gaining clarity can be innovation in a small charity. And so their question was, how do we get a grant for something like this? Because we don't have capacity for it, but we also don't have a future. So what would you say to them?
Yeah, I always defined innovation, and I think perhaps, if anything, it was possibly misunderstood by people on first glance. When I use that term innovation, it's more around the idea of what's innovative for you as an organization. So, we're not necessarily anticipating, curing cancer, for example, or,
yes. Yeah.
We, and the clients that we have, we're kind of looking for opportunities to help an organization kind of get out of its rut or out of its kind of defined space. This is, I think, how major donors can, how they operate differently than the constituency of the organization. So you have in any charity, you'll have committed donors, people that are consistent and reliable in their giving. The grants that we're involved in are kind of different than that, because we're seeing these grants as they're large enough to actually affect change, to help an organization get out of its standard operating mode and to try something new, to pilot some kind of initiative to keep the organization growing and healthy. You need change too. So it's like looking into that as opposed to just the ongoing everyday reality. Both types of funding are needed. Chose to land on the side of funding into innovation for these organizations.
So important, because that actually is for the health of the sector, which means that the global impact, it's really a waterfall where you help the organization be healthy, and then actually it has an enormous global impact when you're able to do that. So speaking to that, Nate, you mentioned some kind of blind spots, or I forget what the exact phrase that you used. You can reiterate yourself. So what do you see as some of these blind spots or areas that you wish organizations would ask for help with?
When I think of the landscape of Canadian charities, we've operated in a reactive model for decades. In the States, just as a comparison, because the States has kind of more of a backbone of innovation, as in terms of startup culture and really pushing the envelope on new ideas. I think that the charitable sector in the States has a different relationship with its major donors, because they don't have as much government involvement in the sector. I think that there's kind of it's commonly understood down there that the major donors are the only ones that are going to do this, or in terms of funding. In Canada, there's a little bit more of a reliance on the government, which everyone will have their own opinion about, but I think that one effect is that it's created a culture of reactivity instead of proactivity. And so I would love it if the charitable sector saw itself as separate from the governmental sector and separate from the private sector. We talk about the third sector as being this entity in and of itself, but really in Canada, the lines are quite blurry between both of those three, or all three of those sectors. And I think that there's a lot of power in storytelling. And I think that when we tell ourselves a story that is reliant on other industries that aren't necessarily related, I just see a need for more clarity, more transparency between stakeholders. But it's not too far from a reality. I think it really is quite a small leap from where we're at. And I think all it's going to take is a little bit of storytelling.
Are you a nonprofit leader passionate about your organization's mission but unsure how to communicate it effectively? Do you wish your communications budget went further, that your development and communications teams worked better together, or that you had a stronger plan to find new supporters? At Graf-Martin Integrated Marketing Solutions for Good, we get it. With you in mind, we've custom-built solutions for nonprofit organizations to make your message have more impact, reach further, and connect with the right people for years to come. Schedule your free consultation by emailing solutions@grafmartin.com. Again, that's solutions@grafmartin.com. The other thing that I see you modeling, and as something that I have seen we really need, and I talked to Sean Plummer in Food for the Hungry in this season, and we talked about collaboration. We actually have Alice and Allie, Michael Messenger talking together. We're interviewing them together because collaboration is key, and you're modeling that. So how do you wish organizations would collaborate, or what are you seeing as optimal collaborations? I know I didn't prep you for this, but we're just going there.
Collaboration. I mean, there's so many different ways that people can collaborate, and I think that it's about building community, first of all, and I mean that in the most authentic sense of the word. Like, this sector is, everyone's trying to get by and do their own little piece of the puzzle. But I think to recognize that we're all kind of shooting for the same goal, just to build a better framework for Canadian society. We're trying to lift people up that would otherwise not be lifted up. We're trying to bring in people that have been marginalized back into the fabric of our society. And I think in order to do that, collaboration isn't just essential. It's kind of the point, whether it's the beginning, middle, or end. I see collaboration as being woven throughout this whole story. Yeah, I think all that I'm really saying is that we're about building community and building good relationships.
And I think one of the other thoughts I would have on that is, if you're wanting to collaborate, look for someone who's not like you. Try to, rather than having two people who are offering the very same qualities or experience or ideas, don't be threatened by people who are different than you, and invite them into the conversation. So I think it actually will strengthen all of us if we can include, as partners, organizations that might not be like us.
Do you see an expectation, because you serve a collaborative group of family foundations and these are your clients? Do they expect collaboration, and do they find it?
We're ending that program this year.
Okay.
One of your questions that I was preparing for today was around COVID. What are you not doing as a result of the pandemic? So what happened during COVID was a real analysis of, what's going on here and what are we doing? And I think for us, the life cycle of Stronger Together has ended. We did it for 10 years. We did this collaboration together with other foundations, and we've all learned a lot through it. I see how, over the period, I think there were 18 different foundations that participated at one time or another in the Stronger Together group. And the typical pattern, I think, was foundations would join up with our initiative. They'd learn some best practices in philanthropy. They'd be inspired. They'd perhaps take some of the tools that we used together to help them in their family philanthropy going forward. It was a collaborative learning experience where they had an opportunity to benefit from it, and then it empowered them so that they carried on their own.
And I would also say that the group did become a community, and everyone that has been a part of that group, I think, has felt that in some form or another. But as it's ending, I still feel very much connected to a lot of the foundations that were a part of that. I think the sense of community building was foundational there. Yeah.
Foundational.
Sorry, as soon as I heard that, I was like, no pun intended, I guess.
Well, and what I hear you saying is that collaboration is critical for learning together, because I think some of us are afraid to collaborate because we're afraid we're going to get stuck with someone. That's okay. Just to be really blunt, we're going to get stuck with someone, working with someone for a long time that we don't like, and that it ends badly. A lot of us are, I think, just really afraid of it ending badly. But changing the expectation to be, how can we be a community that learns from each other? Is that what you found?
and good boundaries, in those relationships, and touch points through the process of, okay, is this working for you? Let's evaluate. A chance, graceful exit strategy moments
Mm-hmm.
time to time as
Mm-hmm.
opportunities, just to keep the relationships healthy, I think is important.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody's always committed to the current round, thing that you're working on together.
Mm-hmm.
I think that with collaboration and innovation, with both of those things, that you're not basing it off of a model that already exists. And I think that the human element, the dynamic nuances of human relationships are always going to play a role. And so it's not really there's not really going to ever be a one size fits all solution. Which I hear a lot of questions regarding these concepts, asking for a one size fits all solution. But it's kind of like saying, like, what's the best way of dating? There's not really the best way of dating. Where you go on a date and you see if you click, and then you keep going, or not.
Yeah, or not, and that's okay.
And that's totally okay.
Yeah, sometimes weird, but it's also okay.
Yeah. Awkwardness isn't the worst thing in the world.
So, okay, Mark, one of the questions I did prepare you for, because I was like, I gotta go there. So when I moved back to Canada 16 years ago, I started hearing about this Bridgeway Foundation when I was talking to charities. And okay, I say this with all respect because I get called the book girl, which drives me insane, but you've been kind of the money guy for Christian charities in Canada. So, and I'm sure you love that, because that's your whole identity. But what would you say, as kind of the money guy, what would you say to charities this year as they are trying to, because everybody's pivoting. We've kind of moved to a 3-month strategic plan rather than a 5-year strategic plan, because everything keeps changing. So what would you say to them as they're trying to figure out financially what happens next?
I would say that, whatever strategic plan you've developed is, now toast, obviously,
Mm-hmm.
and so, and I think that moving forward, each charity must determine how it's going to respond in this new environment that we live in. The pandemic has impacted everybody so tremendously. Some charities have had to shut down what they do because you can't gather, or whatever. I think donors definitely understand that this has been the reality, and so I think that people are reasonable.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that unless you're communicating how we're going to respond to this reality going forward, a major donor will want to know how you're responding and what you're learning through this.
Mm-hmm.
I see where we're going as, major donors will want to be involved in helping invest into whatever new landscape is happening for that charity. So, prepare your thinking around, how am I communicating to these major donors of mine, where we are going into this new reality.
Mm-hmm.
It's an opportunity, actually, I think, for major donors to really get excited about being involved in a new reality for that organization. The other thing about it is, it's a really refining moment, like a refiner's fire type of thing.
Yes, it is.
Stuff gets burned up, and purified. Nate and I have been grappling with that even this summer as we're doing our own strategic planning for our firm. We're dropping some things, we're letting go of certain things like Stronger Together, which is now ended. Different things that we have been doing in the past, we're not doing into the future because our landscape has changed, and we've had to shuffle and make significant changes even within our organization.
It's the next normal. I keep calling it not the new normal. It's the next normal. So is there anything that you've started doing that you want to carry forward into this new season? And maybe that is just being willing to say things. It's okay for things to get burned up. It's okay to end things.
It is okay. Sure. Yeah. Well, what I feel personally that I've started doing through this is really intentionally investing in this next generation. I said earlier how, I kind of woke up one morning during this pandemic thinking, okay, I can really get excited about investing in my son, his future. And that's what I'm living for right now.
That's good.
A lot of excitement, and I'm thrilled about that.
Nate, how do we invest in the next generation? So if you've got leaders that are kind of your dad's age and they're wondering, I see people just kind of stretched as it is. So how do they invest in the next generation even when they're stretched in this season?
I mean, Mark's ability to invest in me has been a gift that I will never be able to repay. And, there's certainly a whole complex that comes along with being a next gen person in this role. But I think that the idea of mentorship, quality mentorship, I think for my generation that's going to be an invaluable experience for I think both parties.
Well, I find it invaluable for myself,
Well, and in
not way either.
the relationships that I've been able to make with even Mark's peers, for example, have given me the confidence to start doing this work. And I've heard the term imposter syndrome a lot lately, and I was actually just speaking to someone about it last night that I don't like the idea of it being a syndrome. I think that when you have big shoes to fill, there's you're gonna feel uncomfortable, and that's not a syndrome. That's a reality that you just have to navigate your way through. And so in terms of succession and mentorship, I think that's the relationship between millennials and Gen X and boomers needs to heal. I think that there's a lot that my generation needs to learn from, especially from boomers. The different ways that we see the world, I don't think that they qualify the amount of bad communication that has existed between those generations. And I think that the solution to that is mentorship, and is intentionally setting aside time in your monthly schedule to spend time with somebody that's older, maybe has been through the ringer a couple times and has some stories to tell. And I think that kind of relationship is fun. Like it when you look at, for any millennials out there, look at your grandparents and look at their friends and try and find people that you admire and respect. I think that there's the breakdown in communication generationally has had a lot to do with respect. And I think that it's time for the younger generation to quit complaining about the ways that they perceive the world to be messed up by older generations and start to acknowledge the ways that it's been built by those older generations.
Well, and I wonder if a gift of this COVID season, which hopefully is just a season, let's just pray that, right? But that the idea of imposter syndrome is all of us figured out that we don't know what we're doing when it comes to this. Not our government doesn't know. I talked to our local MP and he said, we have never moved so fast. Like usually to move a bill through and to get it all prepared, it's years, not 2 months or 6 weeks or something. And so I wonder if for all of us in leadership, we've all figured out that the dirty secret was that none of us actually knew what we were doing, and we're all figuring out and doing the best we can with what we've got. And so maybe we actually need each other more than we thought.
I think that there's something there with in the COVID era. I think for at least for myself, I've really felt this. It's been a time to consolidate the things that really matter to you, and your deep friendships and your family relationships and your values, and kind of figuring out what's really important and what's real, and the rest of it can kind of slip away.
Well, and I had one leader on the podcast who said, I was scared, who talked about COVID and said, I was scared. And I think all of us, that's a little bit of we don't know, we're a little bit fearful of what's to come because it's unknown, which is a great opportunity to innovate, a great opportunity to be more essential. And just for you guys, one of the most encouraging things that I have heard recently is that the trend, especially with faith-based charities, is that giving is up and has stayed up. They've expected this giant trough, But, and I think, Nate, you mentioned this idea of this faith and not throwing out our baby with the bathwater, and this idea around giving as a virtue, but that giving is up in the faith-based charities sector. And it's encouraging for people like you too.
Absolutely. We've talked about the difference between monthly donors and major donors, that these are really two different fundraising avenues, and that there should be strategies developed specifically for each. And I think that right now with monthly donors up, really what it's showing is that we have the ability to create a new stable environment, or maybe restabilize our charitable environment. But then in terms of major donors, there's good news as well. And that is that we're about to experience the largest wealth transfer in human history. And from the boomer generation to the millennial generation, there's a lot of foundations being set up right now. And foundations exist. Essentially, once a foundation is created, that money is already dedicated to charitable giving. You can't really liquidate that foundation, and that money is charity dollars. And 90% of foundations, family foundations, are set up to exist in perpetuity, which means that they're giving out of the return on their investments, and they're able to, in theory, give for forever. But the more of these foundations that pop up across Canada, the more major donors there's going to be, and not major donors that will come and then go, but major donors that hopefully, with good relationships, will stay.
This is why it's so important for family foundations to think now about transition and succession, preparing next generation for leadership, because they will have actually significant influence on the decisions where these dollars go, and they need to own the vision themselves. Each generation needs to own the vision for this principle of money that is there, and have their own kind of vision for what this could be used.
So do you have to be, here's a question I don't know the answer to. Do you have to be enormously wealthy to start a family foundation? Like, is this for billionaires, or who is this for? Who starts a family foundation?
Well, your next door neighbor starts a foundation, and maybe this is an exaggeration or, wishful thinking, but a lot of people that start foundations, they're not multi-millionaires, perhaps. They are people that have had some success, entrepreneurial, perhaps, and they're choosing to. It's a lifestyle choice of priorities. Where am I putting my wealth? There are some. I think this is true actually within what we would consider Christian philanthropy. Is the people that start foundations, rather than, there are definitely Christians that do spend money on yachts and properties all over the world, the stereotype of what we would have in a wealthy person. But there are many people who are like the next door neighbor. They might have had that wealth, but they choose to put it all in the foundation, into luxury items for themselves. I think one's faith does modify and temper those processes, which are egregious and, dare I say, sinful. Everyone has to judge themselves, and you have to be comfortable with the choices you before God, really. But
good.
One thing that when that next door neighbor might set up a foundation with the intention to give this money away, I think that the picture in a lot of people's heads is that giving money away is quite simple, and that there's, you just give it to a great charity. And unfortunately, because of a lot of factors, you have maybe family dynamics can get really messy in terms of where money goes, and or governmental oversight might put restrictions around who you can give to and when and how. And then there's lots of other factors that make this giving complicated. One of which might be, I think this is often the biggest shock to people, is the number of asks that they receive every day. from charities that are doing great work. And I think that this is really where we come in, is to say it's okay to say no to people if you've already decided on what your agenda is. If an organization comes up to you and asks for a grant and they don't fit your priorities, it's actually better for the whole sector if you really pinpoint what you're about and you move forward in a clear and transparent manner. I think that professionalizing a foundation is the step that people don't anticipate when they set up a foundation.
Right. They often set up their foundation as a tax strategy and an act of faith for those that have faith, but they have not necessarily thought through the implications of then having this foundation. How am I going to make these decisions? What kind of process? Who's eligible for these grants? Because everybody's going to get found out once you set up your foundation. You're in the database of everybody who's fundraising, and you can't escape. This. It rather than just acting passively and passive aggressively, actually. In some way, and sometimes my suggestion would be, come and create a proactive approach how you're going to interact with organizations.
So good. So okay, just to wrap up, Nate, is there anything that you would like to say to your peers? You kind of said it, like you need to be willing to listen and be mentored and all of those things. But is there anything else that you would like to say, especially around philanthropy or giving, or anything you want to say to your peers as they are in this season?
I think that we have a ton of work to do. That's really the crux of what I'm about right now, both personally and collectively with my generation. I think that this time we've seen a big shift in how we're going to relate to each other and our government and the marginalized in our society. We're gonna have to rethink our capacity for work. We're in a time. The internet age has, with the instant gratification and all of these things, it's really changed how we perceive work. And so, in terms of helping the charitable sector be a stable and efficient system, I think that really it's about getting our hands dirty and volunteering. If you have time, volunteer. Organizations need your help, and if you've got the resources to give, I personally I'm always up for a conversation, and so I think for me personally, like, I learn the best through conversation and through dialogue and debate, and so I think that it's time for us to start taking that seriously, and I'm excited because I think that where there's a great need, there's also room for great success. And I think that we're capable.
Well, I'm grateful for thoughtful people like you, Nate, because I know that your peers are also grappling with everything that's happened around this year and this being jaded. So I'm very grateful that you have chosen to be in this sector.
Yeah, thank you. And just to touch on Weave just for a second, because it did totally rock our world. Like, in terms of public trust in the sector, like, the whole Canadian sector of Canadian charity has been rocked by that reality. But what I want to highlight about that issue is the need for due diligence and the need for charities aren't necessarily going to be. It's a bad assumption to assume that charities are going to be ethical. Not all charities are ethical, and I think that if somebody is giving major donations, they have a responsibility to their donations to do due diligence on where that money is going and how it's being used. So, which is just to say, I think that the We Charity scandal will have created a more robust charitable sector just because it was such a failure.
Well, and Mark, was this when you were basically like, what am I doing? Why Is this when you had your moment of, why am I still doing this? Because your job is more necessary than ever now, but more complex. So what would you say to your peers in this landscape right now?
My peers being other philanthropists.
Other philanthropists, yeah.
I think, I would jump on the comment about We Charity too. Like, I think our context right now tells us we do need to do due diligence. And at Stronger Philanthropy, we've created tools and systems that have given us competency in that, and we're making those available to other major. All you have to do is ask. We'd be happy to do the due diligence for them and share our learnings with them on specific grants that they might be making, or any way we can serve them with our background. The due diligence, it's not just about going to a website and checking out, just let's look rosy and fresh, feeling and all of that. So as much as I love brand, Ellen, and I know that's your expertise, it's not just about the spin or about the marketing. We want to, when you do due diligence, you have to kind of dig deep, examine financial statements, meet with people face to face, if possible, or virtually if not, and just kind of do a deep dive on the charity health. We do that not to judge whether an organization is an A+ organization or a C+ organization, but because often we will make grants to organizations that aren't the healthiest out there. It's so that when we do make the grant, we know kind of the reality of the organization. We know their the skeletons in the closet, perhaps, the issues that are being dealt with, and we want to be part of that solution.
Oh, it's so good. Well, and you will be glad to hear, I think, that as part of our brand process, I frequently say, is that true? To organizations. So they actually have to write brand proofs. So if they say that the reason why they're awesome and they serve this area the best is because they do these things, I say, okay, now prove it. Do you actually do the things you say that you're the best at? And if not, how do we fill the gap? So
that's good. I was thinking about that the other day. I watched CNN and it goes, CNN, the most trusted name in news. And then I thought, is that true?
And you can hear my voice in the back saying, prove it. So prove it.
This is so good. So if anyone wants to know more about you and what you do, how do they find you?
Yeah, strongerphilanthropy.ca.
Strongerphilanthropy.ca. Strongerphilanthropy.ca. That's perfect. Easy. I'm so glad that we got to spend this time together. Thank you. I know that it will be helpful for leaders, charity leaders, philanthropists who are listening, business leaders who might even consider setting up a foundation. So really grateful for your time.
I've written a book called Love Giving Well.
Yes.
Philanthropy as Pilgrimage. So that's available through our website or Amazon as well, if people are interested in knowing.
And we will make sure that there's a link in our show notes to where that people can find your book online. So good to have you with us. I'm sure this is not our last conversation.
Let's have one again soon. Yes.
Great to chat, Ellen. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Changemakers podcast, brought to you by Graf-Martin Integrated Marketing Solutions for Good. Graf-Martin is Canada's leading integrated marketing and communications agency for nonprofit organizations seeking to do more good. If you need an agile, full-service marketing agency to move your organization forward, we get it. Visit grafmartin.com to learn more and schedule your free consultation so that you can do more good.